Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So I would like to welcome everyone this evening. So one of the things you might notice if you listen to a lot of Dhamma talks from the Thai forest tradition, particularly from the Thai teachers and the Kruba Ajahns in Thailand, is you'll notice the frequent use of this word Pāramī and talking about Pāramīs and developing Pāramīs. And so I thought maybe I'd kind of explain a little bit about this tonight. So, about what these Pāramīs are exactly and how we can, work on them and develop them in our own practice. So this term Pāramī, it means perfection. It's usually translated as these perfections. But it's really this list of these 10 like personality qualities or these like spiritual qualities that we're working on developing. And, they get focused on very heavily in a lot of the teachings in Thailand. Sometimes the kind of the general way it's used in Thailand is, kind of not quite accurate. So it's kind of taken on a slightly different meaning in just kind of the everyday use in Thailand. So a lot of times, you'd say like, if say someone offered me a whole bunch of coffee, people might say, "Oh, Nando, you've got a lot of coffee bar me." And coffee is not one of the 10 Paramis. It's not not one of these list, of qualities to develop our coffee quality. Because sometimes it gets kind of misunderstood or misused as kind of accumulation of karma or some kind of good accumulation of merit in a particular area. But as far as my understanding of them, they're very much it's not meant like that. This is meant to be this list of these 10 spiritual qualities that we can develop, and that once developed, these are really going to help us with our practice. And as we're practicing, we're going to be, either intentionally or unintentionally developing different qualities like this. And so a lot of times in, Western Buddhism or in some other schools, even in different Asian countries, this list of Paramis is of 10 Paramis is completely thrown out. It's completely disregarded because the Buddha never like actually taught these 10 Paramis. As far as I understand in any sutta, he never sat down and said, okay, bhikkhus, these are the 10 Paramis to be developed. But these 10 Paramis are taken from the Jataka tales. They're taken from these tales of the Buddha's previous lives when he was still a bodhisattva, working to develop himself to become a Buddha. So a lot of times when people start talking about Paramis, about developing Paramis, right away they might start thinking about bodhisattva path. And these are something which is, you only have to really think about or you only have to work on when you're working on developing the bodhisattva path. But then when you see the way they're talked about in the Thai forest tradition, they're very heavily emphasized all along in in teaching and in practice. And it's one of those things, in the beginning when I, first came, when I was a new Pakao, new novice, it wasn't something I really thought very much of these 10 Paramis. But the longer I've stayed a monk, the more I've really seen the importance of these and the importance of how these are going to help people develop their practice and how these really help support your practice. Or the opposite, how not having these developed can really let one drop away from the practice and move away from the practice. So I think probably now I should probably list the 10 Paramis instead of being vague and mysterious. So the 10 Paramis are Dana, Sila, Nekama, Panya, Virya, Kanti, Sacha, Aditana, Metta, and Upekkha. So the first one, Dana, this means like generosity. And, this is the practice of developing generosity. We hear a lot about this throughout our practice. Um, the second one is Sila, or our morality, our actions of body and speech. The third one is Nekama, which is our renunciation. The fourth one is Panya, which is wisdom. The fifth one is Virya, which is like our energy or our effort. The sixth one is Kanti, which is our patience or our patient endurance. Um, the seventh one is Sacha, which is translated as truthfulness, but I prefer translating it as honesty. The eighth one is aditana, which is our ability to make determinations or like resolutions, that ability to, when we've determined our mind that we're going to do something or that we're going to not do something, that, we can really stick to that. The ninth one is metta or loving kindness. And the 10th one is equanimity, or, that ability for our mind to just stay level, to stay even, polyupekkha. And so one of the ones I always feel gets the not as much attention as it should. And one of the ones that I've talked about before, but I find really important to us is this one of Sacha, or truthfulness, or like I said, I prefer, translating as honesty. So it was the other day I was having this conversation with this layperson, and they were talking about um how sometimes, out of metta, not giving someone something or not doing something for someone can actually be what's most helpful for them. That encouraging them to stand on their own and to really, develop some, inner strength, inner ability to do things themselves. And so we were having this discussion about this, and we were discussing about how, yeah, sometimes like even you'll get sometimes you can do something kind of which comes off kind of harsh, but it's really encouraged by metta, by loving kindness. And so, for example, if a little kid goes to touch a burning hot pot, the parent says, no, 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 don't touch that. Or if the kid goes to stick their finger in a wall socket, the parent can come off really hard, don't touch that. But it's not out of anger, well, hopefully, but it's out of wanting what's best for the kid. So it's like the root for it is metta. But when we were talking about this, one of the things I was saying is it's really important to, when you're doing something like that, like, saying, oh, actually, I uh don't want to be don't want to do something to help this person because I think this will be the best for them. You have to really have a lot of sacha. You have to have a lot of this honesty with yourself, and to be really honest that this is actually the intention. Because, in Buddhism, like for creating karma and for like, a lot of what can determine whether an action is actually wholesome or unwholesome, it can really come down to your intention. And and for us, it's really important to be honest and honest about our intentions, and not just honest to other people, but really honest with ourselves, because it's very easy for us to lie to ourselves. Sometimes it's to protect ourselves. There's a truth which we really don't want to hear, or sometimes, we just yeah, we just have this ability to not always be so honest with ourselves. And there's this quote, this teaching from Meichi Gao, which I've right from the time I read it, I've really loved this teaching. So Meichi Gao was this really famous nun in Thailand. She was a disciple of Luang Por Man and of Luang Ta Mahabua. And she's pretty much universally accepted to be fully enlightened, have become an arahant. And her quote, she says, know yourself, accept your faults and work to overcome them. Hide nothing from yourself. Above all, don't lie to yourself. You can lie to the entire world if you like, but you must never lie to yourself. So of course she's not actually encouraging you to lie to the world, but she encourages not lying and stuff. But it's just that way she's really emphasizing that we have to really be honest with ourselves and be honest with ourselves about our faults, and that ability to be honest with ourselves is really going to help us with our practice with things in our lives, because because like I was saying, it's very easy to lie to yourself. So I know I use it quite often as the examples is, sometimes in life you have those I tell it like it is people, and they will be blunt, they will be harsh in the way they speak to people. And, they'll just say, "Oh, this is who I am. I'm just, I like just being truthful. I'm just telling it like it is." But from my experience with people like this, that's not really what it is. When you get to know them, the reason they're doing it is because they're being mean, and they're purposely doing it to being mean. They're not doing it to tell the truth. They're not doing it to help you. A lot of times they're just doing it as a way to put someone down. But I think a lot of times they, really aren't very honest with themselves about why they're doing it. They can really tell themselves this is actually very, very helpful. And you can see sometimes like the mind can come up with these really, really clever ways to fool yourself. When I was about to ordain as a monk, sorry, I was about to ordain as a novice at Wat Chat. So I was a white robe Pakau at that time. And one night I went with a couple other monks to go see Lumpur Mahamon. And Lumpur Mahamon was, one of the most senior disciples of Lumpur Cha, very respected. And we went there, and Lumpur Mahamon was giving me all this advice about, for ordaining and joining the Sangha and going forth. But one of these other monks, he had been a monk for a couple of years. And kind of out of nowhere, like Lumpur Mahamon was giving him this really beautiful, like encouragement about, don't worry about not being the smartest person. He said, it's not important, to be the smartest. There's always going to be someone smarter than you. What's really important is being good. Just work on being a good person. And he said, really clever people can find really clever ways to justify their kilesas or justify their defilements. And so you can sometimes see that people have that, especially if they can get really clever and find these really clever ways to lie to themselves, to not be honest with themselves about what their intentions are, of where they're at. And this is really important in our practice to be honest like this, especially honest with ourselves, where we're at in our practice, what practices are working, what things aren't working for us. So to really know, like, know our faults, know our strengths as well too. And so, you can really see this sometimes, you may want to be practicing at a higher level, want to be doing this thing, but you're not really honest that you're not there yet. And so, when I was a Cowan novice at Wat Pananachat, um, I was reading all these books by Lungta Mahabua, by Lumpur Man, and they're talking about the way they practiced. And they practiced like really like hardcore. And they like I would say they were like the Navy SEALs of Buddhist monks, right? So they had that really high, really refined level of practice. And I didn't. So I was trying to practice like that, and it just wasn't working. And I'd get really down and really hard on myself, and that, oh, I'm a failure because I can't do it like they did. But I didn't realize, I didn't know that they were at a different level of practice. So and but a lot of times we can kind of fool ourselves even when we know that there's these different levels, and people with these different abilities can practice differently. Sometimes we like to fool ourselves to think that not be honest with ourselves that we're not at that level. But we can also um have to be honest with ourselves the other way around too, is we have to be honest with ourselves also about our strong points, be honest with ourselves about those things we do well. Because a lot of times, we can really put ourselves down. We can really be hard on ourselves. Or a lot of times we're just so trained to think that anytime we say something good about ourselves, and not even out loud, like, just in our own mind, say something good about ourselves or praise ourselves, that's ego. That's just building up self, or, that's just being conceited. But, but in this, it's being honest, to know, okay, I can do this good. This is something I'm good at. This is something I have some skill at. And that's very helpful for us, in life and in our practice to just be really aware. Yeah, I can do this. This is something I good. This is one of my strengths. I can lean into that. So this is one of these paramis, these spiritual qualities that I don't think gets talked about a lot, and I've always found really important is that really trying to be honest with ourselves, be honest about our intentions, be honest where we're at, and again, being honest with ourselves doesn't mean we have to tell everybody, right? So it doesn't mean we have to tell everyone all of our faults and all of this. Like I remember, this is probably going to age me, but I remember back in the 90s, there was this Jim Carrey movie. It was called Liar, Liar. And I forget how it happened, but I don't know, magic or something happened to him. And I can't remember that, but he couldn't lie. The movie was he was a liar, and then something happened to him and he couldn't lie anymore, but he'd be super honest. So, if someone said, how do I look today? Um, Before he would have lied and went, oh, you look great. But after this, he'd be like, oh, you look absolutely terrible. And being honest isn't like that. You don't have to tell everything all the time. It doesn't mean you have to be an open book all the time, but at least, being honest with yourself about that. And so with um, these, the Sacca, the honesty, but with all of these 10 Paramis, these 10, personality traits, spiritual qualities, that we're trying to develop. One of the things is we can sometimes actively work on developing a certain quality of this. So if there's somewhere, we feel we need to strengthen it, we need to work on a little more, we can intentionally do that. So say something like the adhitthana or the determinations, these resolutions, we can put some effort into, okay, I'm going to actively strengthen that. And you can do that by, making these determinations, these adhitthanas, and then keeping them. And the more you do it, that more that quality is going to grow in you and strengthen in you, so that when you do, say, put your mind to something, you do it, and it just becomes more a part of your character, a part of your personality. Same with the truthfulness. The more you really watch yourself, catch yourself when you're not being truthful with yourself, and really work on being truthful with yourself, again, the more that's going to grow and become part of your personality. And so with a lot of these paramis, we can either, take an intentional effort to develop them, but a lot of them also just doing the practice, they're going to develop on their own, or some of them will develop just, from circumstances in life. So I'm sure anyone who's a parent knows that probably they developed a lot of patience, a lot of Kanti Barmi being a parent, or probably a lot of Wirya Barmi as well. But so a lot of times while we're doing the practice, sitting meditation, there is a certain amount of patience we developed, bringing ourselves back to our meditation object, bringing our mind back, sitting for longer periods of time. And so a lot of these will just develop naturally as a byproduct of the practice. So I would like to offer that to everyone as a bit of a reflection for this evening.